All right, welcome back. Now we'll go into the conversation on climate change mitigation and the plea to get more youths involved in the process. Today we'll be focusing on the conversation as regards the demands that are being made of the incoming government and the presidential candidates, whichever should emerge victorious come February 25th, 2023. That's just 10 days away. Now, I've been joined in the studio by Professor Chukwumerije Okereke. He's the Director, Center for Climate Change and Development, Alex Ekwueme Federal University. He joins me now to speak on the issue. Welcome to the program, Professor. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's go with the basics of it. Now, a new government could be coming in very soon. What are the things that you want them to focus on and really take charge of as they're coming in?
Thank you very much. Of course, more broadly speaking, we know that economic development should be a priority, security should be a priority, tackling corruption should be a priority. But for the purposes of our meeting today, it is about the need for this incoming government to really recognize the economic implications of climate change and the need for an aggressive and well-coordinated policy and set of measures to be able to tackle it. You see, in my view, climate change is one of the most important economic challenges facing this country. And so I find it very disturbing that none of the key political parties or presidential aspirants have made any significant bold statement on the subject of climate change and what they intend to do to tackle climate change if and when they get into power. Now, one of the reasons is that people kind of don't fully understand what the climate change represents in terms of its impact. And so some people think it's just a small environmental problem somewhere, like an ozone layer depletion that is sort of abstract, or the melting of polar bears in the Arctic. But that is not the case. And climate change, as I've already indicated, is one of the, if not the most important development challenges facing Nigeria. And let me just, lay out some of the facts. According to the research done by the UK government, climate change is already costing Nigeria 100 billion per annum as at 2020. And by 2050, it will be costing Nigeria up to 460 billion per annum. Some of the areas in which climate change is affecting Nigeria include the area of agriculture. We have changes in precipitation and weather patterns that are affecting the crop yield and exacerbating the issue of food insecurity in the country. And don't forget that 70% of the Nigerian population depend on agriculture for livelihood. So if you have a phenomenon or an issue that is affecting 70% of your population and reducing their ability to grow food and to feed themselves, there you already have one of the most severe economic challenges facing you. Second, we see what the massive flooding impact that happened just in the last year. Almost all states, without exception, are affected. In 2012, we also had a similar devastating flooding event. It cost Nigeria about 16 billion US dollars, the direct and the indirect impact. We have a country that is, that has a very long coastline, about 3,400 kilometers squared. And already we have about 300,000 people in Lagos alone that are vulnerable to sea level rise. And that number is going to go up to 3.2 million by 2050 if drastic action is not taken. One of the biggest ones is the fact that we are actually an oil-dependent country. We get about 86% of our foreign exchange earning from sale of crude or oil. And then we have a global community that is moving away fastly from oil and embracing renewable energy technology. The question becomes, who are you going to sell your oil to in 2040, 2050, if about 15 countries and up to 20 principalities around the world have already placed a ban on the use of fossil fuel driven cars in their jurisdiction? So whether you're looking at the impact of climate change or the future of oil on which our country depends on, Nigeria is in between the devil and the deep blue sea. And without adequate attention in understanding the economic impacts of climate change, Lake Chad is drying up. Desertification is causing mayhem in the north. It is partly pushing people, especially nomads, the cattle areas down the south, in search of greener pastures that are being limited as a result of changes in weather patterns. And that is adding to the insecurity that we are facing today in this country. So in terms of security, in terms of economy, in terms of migration, in terms of the future of oil, Nigeria is in a dire condition, and we need to recognize the economic importance of climate change and act. And as I said, I am worried that none of the incoming key presidential aspirants have really made a big address on climate change.
All right. The question now is, while trying to break down, a lot of what you've said now, there are people who believe that the more developed countries are trying to pull a fast one on the developing nations. They say when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and all of that, that the developed countries still have way more than the developing. Perhaps you break that down for us. So take for instance, one candidate actually did say, well, in passing, I wouldn't say he made it a policy, that to handle the issue of climate change, they would need those other countries to pay us, pay Nigeria, pay developing nations to basically key into that aspect, because they say not or doing those things that reduce emissions and all of that is basically reducing our own industrialization and our own process to becoming developed. So those countries should be buffering our efforts. What do you make of that ideology?
That's a very good question. I actually remember the episode to which you're referring. It's very fresh in my mind. This candidate said that the issue of climate change is a bit like, how do you stop the church rats from eating the poison communion?
Yes. And
went on to say that if the rich countries fail to assist us in taking action on climate change, then we're going to say, like, to hell with them. Now, the truth is that that kind of way of understanding the problem of climate change is very archaic, is very anachronistic, is unhelpful. It is true that developed countries owe developing countries a lot of obligations in taking action. But you cannot say to hell with their climate change, because I've already explained that climate change is having an impact on your agriculture, on your coastline, on your security, on your on your ability to farm, where to live. So it's not their climate change. So, but the first part of that answer that presidential candidate gave has some meaning, i.e., we need to be thinking about how we can position ourselves to best attract help and support from the rich countries who quite clearly are the ones that have contributed the most to causing climate change. So it's a justice problem. The challenge, however, is that you need to, in your own right and jurisdiction, be doing things, be showing leadership, be demonstrating that this is a thing that is killing me, and be showing how you yourself want to work yourself out of that problem and the sort of help that you need from the rich countries in order to assist you to work out of the problem. So it's not their climate change, it's our climate change. It's killing our children, it's killing our parents, it's killing us. It's reducing our food productivity, it's reducing the areas where we can live, it's reducing our ability to farm, it's causing insecurity in the land, it's going to make it impossible for us to sell our oil. Therefore, it is not their climate change, it is our climate change, everybody's climate change. But yes, the rich countries who have contributed the most to this problem need to be told that we need their help. We need to lay out a policy. We need to then say, look, here is what I'm able to do. This is where I need your help to do that. And the present government has already demonstrated a good understanding of what I'm telling you. So Nigeria has announced what we call the nationally determined contribution that says that we will reduce our emissions by X amount, but also that if we get help from the international community, we will go further to reduce from 25% to 47%, for example. So that is a richer, a more nuanced, a more sophisticated, a more informed understanding of the issue. The present government has also announced a net zero target. This is why I'm alarmed, amazed, and surprised that these incoming presidential candidates are not engaging on this issue, because they will inherit a commitment already made by the incumbent administration, saying that Nigeria will become net zero carbon by 2060. Do you know what that means? To become net zero carbon by 2060 is almost like an economic revolution for this country. And so any incoming presidential president will have to engage with this statement. What does it mean for transportation? What does it mean for agriculture? What does it mean for waste management? What does it mean for urban planning? What does it mean for how we cultivate, how we reap, how we consume, how we produce for our industries? So climate change is such a central thing, and in the Western countries, it is almost impossible to have a candidate contest for an election without really saying what their position will be on climate change. Joe Biden, for example, rose to power partly because of his commitment to climate change. And when he became the president of the United States of America, he has established one of the most ambitious, most bold legislations on climate change, which is worth trillions of US dollars. Boris Johnson before him in the United Kingdom also is noted for his ambitious engagement with climate change all around the world. Barack Obama, of course, Donald Trump had a position. It's not a very palatable position, but at least he had a clear position. So it's inconceivable. I don't understand how we can be running an election without having the frontline presidential aspirant address climate change, which is a more than a $4 trillion industry as I speak globally.
All right, just to round off now, if you can help us a little, an inkling of what are those things that you would hear as an expert in the field that would show you that there is movement in the right direction? You know, from these candidates, what are the signs that you would see that would make you feel a little bit relaxed about what the future holds for climate change and Nigeria together?
That's a good question again. As I was saying to you, we had a massive flooding event last year, right? I think only one candidate, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Peter Obi, visited the places and then said in his tweet that climate change is real and that we need to take action. I would have expected the other candidates to follow a similar pattern, to recognize that this flooding event is not just normal. That is as a result, at least in part, of climate change. But to go even further than that, to talk about the economic implications of climate change to the economic development of this country, to security, to agriculture, to settlement, to urban planning, to the future of oil, to diversification of economy, etc., etc., and to be committing as part of their manifesto what they will do in order to ensure that Nigeria takes its rightful position in understanding and tackling of climate change. This has not happened. I've looked at all the manifestos. Precious little has been said on climate change, and it worries me because, again, if you don't have the right environment, you cannot have an economic development.
That's fair enough. Thank you very much, Professor Okirike, for coming and for really breaking it down and raising the alarm, so to speak. I think a lot of people think just as in the normal Nigerian parlance, it's a big man problem, but then again, it's all our problems and we should be concerned. Thanks for coming and thanks for really breaking it down today.
Thank you, Amadi.
All right, that's all we'll take for this segment of the program. We'll go on a break. I'll take you now to a report on climate change and what the government is doing at the moment. When we return, the conversation continues. Stay with us. We'll be right back.